Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Thanks so much for joining with us. Well, the war between Israel and Iran is rapidly escalating. Iran is now striking American diplomatic sites in the region, and the U.S. is warning all U.S. citizens to leave.
President Trump said the fight could last more than a month, and he promised even stronger strikes, saying the big one is coming soon. Our Middle East correspondent Joshua Swanson has the story.
The conflict between Israel and Iran continues to expand, with American forces and diplomatic sites now directly in the crosshairs. Iran hit the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia's capital of Riyadh with a drone strike early Tuesday, causing what Saudi Arabia's defense ministry described as a limited fire and minor damage. It followed an attack the day before on the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait, signaling a widening Iranian response across the region. Iran has attacked targets in a number of other nations, including energy facilities in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. It's also claimed to have closed the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil is shipped. The United States and Israel are intensifying airstrikes inside Iran. President Donald Trump suggested this may only be the beginning of a sustained campaign that could last more than a month. In an interview with the New York Post, Trump refused to rule out sending American troops into Iran if they were necessary. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. knew Israel was about to strike and joined in a preemptive strike to prevent higher U.S. casualties from an Iranian retaliation. He also said the attack was necessary. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel had no choice, calling the threat from Iran urgent.
After we hit their nuclear sites and their ballistic missiles program, you'd think they learned a lesson. But they didn't, because they're unreformable. So they started building new sites, new places, underground bunkers that would make their ballistic missile program and their atomic bomb programs immune within months.
Trump also said that the largest phase of strikes is still ahead. We haven't even started hitting them hard. The big wave hasn't even happened. The big one is coming soon. The human toll is rising. U.S. military officials confirmed that 6 American service members have been killed in the first 3 days of the war, including troops killed in an Iranian strike on a base housing American forces in Kuwait. At the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was asked by a CBN reporter about praying for U.S. forces.
As you've said, there are a large amount of U.S. service members that are in harm's way right now. What is your prayer for them?
I know we think about them with every decision that we make and every recommendation that we make to the President of the United States. Those recommendations are made prayerfully. And when I pray every day for them and for this mission, I pray simply for the biblical wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it.
The U.S. State Department is urging Americans to immediately depart from more than a dozen Middle Eastern countries, including Israel, as the conflict deepens. With American forces now engaged, evacuation warnings in place, and leaders signaling that more strikes are coming, the Middle East stands on the edge. Joshua Swanson, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, the president said the biggest blow is about to come. What are you hearing and what are analysts saying? What is that?
Well, the analysts I talked to said it's really hard to believe a bigger wave could come. The unprecedented aerial campaign in the last 3 days or so, 2,500 strikes by U.S. and Israel have hit the presidential palace, defense ministry, the leadership, decapitated the leadership. They're hitting the IRG headquarters and ongoing efforts to hit the ballistic missile launchers. And they could raise the stakes. One thing they could do, the number of strikes even more. Some have said they could hit more of the nuclear sites, or they could hit Iran's oil infrastructure. But that might affect oil prices, and also if a regime or government comes, they don't want to have that decimated right now. Or some have said it could be rhetoric, just to send a signal, Gordon, to what's left of the Iranian government that the war is far from over. And also just want to let you know that there's a new front in the north that's open. Hezbollah fired some rockets into northern Israel, and the IDF is responding with a campaign, a massive campaign that might signal the end of Hezbollah as we've known it. And also just heard this report just in a few minutes. President Trump is reportedly reaching out to the Kurds along the Iraqi-Irani border. And all of these developments, Gordon, signal we're seeing a new Middle East emerging in real time.
Is there any kind of indication that the Kurds are going to supply the ground troops needed to make sure the Revolutionary Guard doesn't stay in power?
That's possible, and they are armed, and they've been in Turkey, they've been in some in Syria, and some in Iraq, and so they could be one of the potential forces that would actually help overthrow the regime and the IRGC.
Well, today is the Israeli holiday of Purim, when the Jews in Persia were delivered from Haman, the plot to annihilate all of them. Did the Jewish people today see a parallel to the biblical story? And what's the mood in Jerusalem?
Well, 100% is the answer I got from a rabbi friend. What's happening right now in the Middle East is not lost on the Jews here in Israel and around the world. The parallels are striking. Some said just word for word. It's the same month. It's the same day. As you said, about 2,500 years ago, there was a genocidal decree that went out from the king to wipe out all the Jews. Yet the man behind that decree, Haman, was wiped out, not the Jews. And so now, 2,500 years later, that genocidal regime that chanted death to Israel for decades is being taken down. Jews read the book of Esther. It's twice on Purim. They call it the Megillah. Some read it in bomb shelters last night. I just heard some are going to read it later today in bomb shelters as well. That's when Haman, the villain, is booed. Mordecai, one of the heroes, is cheered. And the heroine, Queen Esther, is celebrated. And it's the only book in the Bible, Gordon, where the name of God's not mentioned. And yet many people see, you can clearly see his hand. His name is hidden in the text, but his hand wrote every page. And also, finally, there's a tradition here in Purim for some Jewish men to get a little tipsy as celebrated. But this year, they've been instructed not to get drunk. They need to be alert, get themselves and their loved ones to a bomb shelters within a minute's notice. But one person told me there's no need for alcohol to feel how miraculous this is, how historic the moment is. In 2,000 years, many people, he says, are going to be talking about this. And one of them told me that he told their grandchildren, you'll be telling your children years from now what today was like. And they're feeling like they're living in messianic times.
Well, the best part of Purim is the cookies. So hopefully they have boxes of cookies in these bomb shelters and they can celebrate that way. For such a time as this, we've been saying it for a long time, and I've heard it my entire life. And here we are for such a time as this. It's incredible. It's an incredible moment in history. Well, Chris Mitchell, thanks for joining with us. Here at home, there are new questions about President Trump's justification for launching airstrikes against Iran. Gary Lane has the story.
More and more Democrats on Capitol Hill say there was no imminent threat to the United States and question the airstrikes that were launched against Iran and its leaders. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer spoke to reporters after he left a briefing on Iran with the Secretaries of Defense, State, the CIA, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
I found their answers completely and totally insufficient. In fact, at least to me, that briefing raised many more questions than it answered.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the strikes were a preemptive move.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties.
U.S. envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, says Iran was on the brink of developing a nuclear weapon.
They were proud that they had evaded all sorts of oversight protocols to get to a place where they could deliver 11 nuclear bombs.
The conflict with Iran has nearly stopped shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Because Iran supplies about 20% of the world's oil, consumers in the U.S. and worldwide can expect higher oil and gasoline prices. Last night, President Trump sent a war powers resolution to Congress, saying the campaign against Iran is to protect American troops, the homeland, and our allies. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Well, here now for more is CBN chief political analyst David Brody. So, David, is Secretary Rubio's comment about going in with Israel, is that going to create a problem for President Trump?
No, I think it's a hiccup. Obviously, some Democrats and some far-right Tucker Carlson type Republicans. I say Republicans, I shouldn't even call them a Republican, but folks on the far right see this as what they've been saying all along, that Trump has been dragged into this war by Israel. Really? Name me one time that President Trump has been dragged anywhere by anyone. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. Now, having said that, what he was referring to when he used the word preemptive, he was talking about American casualties. In other words, we had to do it before there were American casualties. Having said that, if you go about 3, 4, 5 minutes or so later on in his remarks, he talks about that no matter what we were going to attack Iran, it was just a matter of time. They just happened to do it right then rather than, let's say, 24 hours later, 48 hours later. I mean, you don't move the entire military, if you will, into position and then say, all right, everybody go home. This was going to happen.
You just kicked somebody out of the party. That's incredible. Right here on national television. Let's just take a moment, and you and I tend to geek out, so let's geek out. The War Powers Act has been triggered now. The president, within the 48-hour time period required, has notified Congress of the action. That, in turn, triggers a 60-day period where forces are still allowed under that justification to operate. And are you seeing a coalition form in Congress to somehow limit that 60-day period?
They're trying, but the answer is no. As a matter of fact, there'll be votes Wednesday this week in the Senate, Thursday most likely in the House, to try and limit the president's war powers with this war powers resolution. Both attempts are expected to fail. It'll be close, but the bottom line is the president should continue to have that authority. Now, having said that, Gordon, let's fast forward into that 60-day time frame. And actually, technically, it would be 90 days, right? 60 days to allow for military action. And then 30 more days, the War Powers Act says, War Powers Resolution says, to get out, the withdrawal time. So about 90 days. After that, especially if there's boots on the ground, well, that's a whole other conversation. My guess at that point, there would be a much stronger coalition to say, wait a minute, Mr. President, it's time for Congress to get involved here. Because as you know, Gordon, Article 1 gives Congress the power to declare war. Article 2, of course, shows that the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And so, quite frankly, Gordon, the U.S. Supreme Court really hasn't ruled on this specifically. You know, it's just always been there ever since Nixon. Presidents have used it, as you know.
Well, it goes back to 1973. The justification is in modern warfare, you don't have time to get an act of Congress. You have to act when the opportunity presents. So, you know, the issue is there a threat to the United States? And, you know, from my point of view, what Iran has been doing for 47 years has been a pretty clear threat to the United States. They keep saying death to America. They've sponsored the Houthis. They have death to America on their flag. And they fired in the Biden years, they fired missiles against our Navy ships. If that's not an act of war, I don't know what is. So let's geek out a little bit more. Within the 60-day period, Congress has to authorize the action. Do you think, and that's if they don't, that's what triggers the 30-day withdrawal period.
Right.
Do you think Congress is going to approve the action?
I think that if there is talk and serious talk of boots on the ground, which we've already heard that President Trump has actually said that he's not ruling it out, if that talk and that drumbeat continues, the answer is yes. I think they could very well do that. I think we have to wait and see. As you know, Gordon, this can get squirrely real fast, real quick. All caps, 72 font. So that's a different situation within 60 days of what we've seen transpire since February 28. So short answer, yeah, I think it could actually, they could curtail some of that power, especially if this goes sideways quickly.
I'm concerned about domestic terrorism. I think most Americans are. We keep hearing about sleeper cells. Has the Revolutionary Guard placed agents on our shores? Are they going to be activated? And Congress still hasn't funded the Department of Homeland Security. Are they playing a pretty risky game with the security of every American?
Well, what the White House is going to say on this, and it's an interesting way that they kind of spin it, and I say spin it, here are the facts. Let's just get to the facts. The Department of Homeland Security is operating on an essential level, right? I mean, it's non-essential employees that are not getting paid. The paperwork's not getting done. Long-term threat assessments aren't being looked at. But short-term threat assessments are. You have everybody as it relates to cybersecurity and border security, all of that. That's still going on. So top-level threats are being addressed even now, despite the fact that Department of Homeland Security is not being funded. So we're talking about kind of lower level stuff, if you will. And there's a lot of stuff within the government, but it's a little bit more of the bureaucratic items that are not getting done. So the White House will argue, look, we're taking care of what we need to take care of. But of course, with homegrown attacks, as we saw down there in the alleged homegrown attack down there in Texas, this type of stuff has reared its ugly head too many times. And, CBN, let's point it out. I mean, CBN was on the front lines of this a decade or two ago, for sure, talking about these homegrown terrorism attacks that would rear their ugly head if and when the time is right. And right now, it sounds like the time is more than right.
Well, the Strait of Hormuz, that was their sort of ultimate threat. Iran has now declared they've closed it. That's 20% of the oil supply. Are we going to see that start to impact prices? I filled up a tank last night, and I don't know if somebody taking advantage of it, but the price was higher. So are we going to see that? Is there going to be new inflation? Is that going to affect the midterm elections?
It's all on the table. I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, just in my area up here, about 5 cents more per per gallon, excuse me. And I think ultimately that will be the case as it'll kind of incrementally go up. But then again, it's going to ebb and flow depending. But look, Strait of Hormuz, of course, 80% or so of the ships not going through. Iran says they've closed it. America says, nah, not so fast. It's not officially closed. We'll see. This is a dangerous powder keg, literally a powder keg.
All right, David, thanks for joining with us. Well, there are reports of thousands of Iranians seeking to flee the country. CBN's Operation Blessing is mobilizing to help them in the neighboring country of Armenia. Drew Friedrich, the president of Operation Blessing International, is here to tell us more. So, Drew, tell us what's going on in Armenia.
Yeah, right now, Gordon, we're mobilizing our teams. We expect an influx of refugees coming into Armenia. It's a Christian nation in the midst of many Muslim nations, and so it's a safe haven for many looking to exit. The great thing about what we're doing at Operation Blessing is we've actually been on the ground in Armenia since 2009 with Orphans Promise. And so we've got an extensive presence. We've got a network of churches. We have ongoing projects that we work through. And so those folks are ready to jump into action. And as these refugees enter the country, provide aid, spiritual support. As you know well, one of the real benefits of being a part of CBN is that we're already there. We have Superbook in their language. We have Superbook in Farsi. We have Superbook in Armenian. And so these kids that are coming are hearing the gospel. Their parents are receiving spiritual aid. They're getting food, hygiene kits, that kind of thing. So we're preparing and we're ready whenever that influx begins.
Is there a supply chain issue with the airspace being shut down? How can we resupply what we currently have in Armenia?
Sure. Again, the good thing is the network we have. So in country, we can purchase. We already purchased some ahead of this when we saw it coming. This isn't the first time we responded to a refugee crisis in Armenia. I think that's a key point as well. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict just a year and a half ago, we were already, staging boxes and kits there as well of food and of hygiene supplies. So we have some of it on hand already. We had money already in country that we prepared for this as well. And it's not the first time we've dealt with refugee crises in response to a war. You think about Ukraine and Russia, where we were right there on the border in Poland. And so we have experience doing this. We've got contacts throughout the region. And so certainly I think our team today is having trouble getting in because so many flights have been canceled in the Middle East. But again, having that presence already there allows us to activate sooner.
You mentioned it. This isn't our first time dealing with refugees coming from a war. How is this either different or similar to what you experienced in Ukraine?
I think it's different in the sense that right now there hasn't been a full-scale sort of boots on the ground war where everybody's leaving the country en masse. We saw Ukraine, Russia, they were heading west in a hurry. Everybody was heading that direction. We knew exactly where they were coming. Here, we don't know. Are they going to go to Turkey? Are they going to go to Azerbaijan? Will they come to Armenia? But again, that's the safest place for our team to work, where we have our largest network. And so I think some of it is a little bit of wait and see. And we're already dealing with Iranian refugees that came after Operation Midnight Hammer in June. And so we've been working with that group. We know them. And so it is a safe place for Iranians to come. But many of them want to just go back home to a free Iran, and we're waiting to see what happens with that.
If they do go back home, let's take a best case scenario.
Sure.
The Revolutionary Guard is taken out of power.
Yep.
The clerics don't select the next ruler of Iran.
Sure.
There's a constitutional assembly. There's democracy. There are free and open elections that are guaranteed. All of those things happen. What would be the plan then?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I would just continue to reiterate, the great thing about our work is we're already there. We announced yesterday, we've been doing this for 20 years over the air in that part of the world. We've got an extensive church network. And so, again, being able to move product and supplies into conflict areas and disaster zones is our specialty. That's what we do at Operation Blessing. We've done it in other war zones. And so utilizing those networks, those bases, we would be able to move product into the country, activate those church networks and volunteers. Again, some of it is going to have to be based on safety. We don't want to put our people in harm's way, but we also know what we signed up for. We signed up to go bring help and hope to a hurting world. People are hurting in Iran. We want to go help.
Well, for decades, we've been saying at CBN Operation Blessing, we do our best work in these times, whether it's war or revolution or disaster. That's exactly when we come in. What's your biggest need right now?
Yeah, prayer, certainly. We always want to be praying for safety and wisdom, but also financial support. You know, people stand with Operation Blessing and they say yes, they allow us to go before the need even happens. And that means we're prepared to go. So, again, we've got a team en route. We've got staff and volunteers on the ground. We have some money in country. We're sending more, but we need people to stand with us financially so we can have all the supplies, all the food, all the hygiene kits that we need. Always a huge need for us in times like this because we don't want someone to show up and us run out of food, us run out of hygiene kits. They're coming desperate. You know, you saw Chuck Holton yesterday say they're crossing the border, bags in hand, with no real plan, but they just needed to exit a dangerous area. We want to be sure we provide them something that brings them back, helps them stabilize, and helps them get their feet on the ground for the next step, whatever that may be.
All right, well, you heard it. If you want to be a part of the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Program, it's real simple. You can call us, 1-800-700-7000. Say, I want to give to Operation Blessing Disaster Relief. You can also write to us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Just put Operation Blessing Disaster Relief. You can even shorten it down to OB Disaster, or just put Disaster Relief on the memo line of a check, and your contribution will go into that designated fund, and that's a designated fund to help with disasters. You can also text OBDR to 71777. Do it now. Let's be a part of supplying. The need is absolutely tremendous when you start considering millions of people trying to flee a war zone, trying to have some kind of safety for their families, and arriving literally with nothing. The need is overwhelming. So let's be a part of the solution. Let's help them in their time of need. And most importantly, let's be there for the King of Kings. That Iran, it's their time. Let's go in full force with the gospel of Jesus Christ to let them know there's a much better way to live. You can be a part of it. Call us, 1-800-700-7000.